To see me after the meeting, I'll get her to come over to your house. We have two great speakers today, and obviously they're great speakers. We have a full house. Y'all are squished in 10 to a table, so this is a really good opportunity to hear more from the city of Dallas. Our first speaker, I believe, is going to be Chris. Chris Turner-Noteware is the Assistant Public Works Director of Engineering, Interagency, and Survey Division for the city of Dallas, a position she's held for 15 months now. She just got here from Arizona, where it was a lot warmer. Her main duties are to oversee the execution of the capital bond program for the Public Works Department, along with interagency transportation projects, paving petitions, and assessment for new street and alley construction, sidewalk replacement programs, and the survey and records library. Prior to joining the city of Dallas, Ms. Turner-Noteware spent over 11 years working for the city of Phoenix, Arizona, overseeing design and construction management for both horizontal and vertical projects, utility coordination and inspection, and a materials lab and survey, along with citywide procurement of public works capital improvement projects. She's also spent over 11 years working as a private consultant throughout the state of Arizona, designing public works projects for government agencies. Ms. Turner-Noteware has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Major of Science in Civil Engineering with a transportation emphasis, both from Arizona State University, let's go Sun Devils, and a registered professional engineer in the states of Texas and Arizona. And then right after, she's going to talk about the design manual and the design standards that are new for the city of Dallas. After that, Mr. Rick Galceran, I'm going to mess it up too probably. He's going to speak about the City Dallas Bond Program. And Rick was appointed as the director of the Bond Program Office for Dallas in September 2018, where he currently serves. Prior to that, he served as the Dallas Public Works Director for 10 years, where he oversaw the city's engineering, architecture design, construction management, street repair, pavement management, traffic ops, transportation planning, land survey services, and parking operations and enforcement. That's a lot. You were busy. Rick has overseen the development of the city's 2012 and 2017 bond program for $1.7 billion, that's billion with an L, and the implementation of the 1998, 2003, 2006, 2012, and 2017 bond programs, together exceeding over $3 billion, again with two L's. Rick earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering and a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of Texas at El Paso. Go Miners! Right? And is a registered professional engineer in the state of Texas. Rick is also a 2007 graduate of the Leadership Dallas program and a 2012 graduate of the Leadership North Texas program. Before he became the Director of Public Works in 2008, Rick held the positions of Assistant Director of Engineering and Construction, Water Distribution Operations Manager, and Pipeline Construction Project Manager for the Dallas Water Utilities Program for 7 years. He also spent 13 years with the city of El Paso in their Water District Water Utilities Department and has worked as an engineering consultant in the private sector before that. So with that, we'll let Chris come on up and talk.
3 more pages.
3 more pages. We'll fit those in at the end.
Well, thank you. I wasn't exactly expecting to see quite this many people, but we will try not to bore you half to death and try not to put you to sleep. So we're going to talk to you today a little bit about the manuals, our paving and drainage manuals, or I guess I should say our street manuals. Talk about the background and history and the street process manual, the street design manual, then our drainage manual, and the schedule of where we're at with those, and then turn it over to Rick to talk about the bond program timeline, propositions, the differences of how we're operating those programs now, the bond program office, and the status of the bond program. So background and history. If this goes, there we go. Basically, why exactly are we rewriting our manuals? Well, as you can see, our drainage manual is 1993. Our paving manual update, last update was 1998. So in 2009, the council adopted integrated stormwater management guidelines. And in 2011, our Complete Streets initiative was launched. So basically, the state of the practice has definitely evolved since then. We have our Complete Streets design policy that we need to integrate. We now have sustainable practices and LID that we need to incorporate. And we have redevelopment and infill that we want to get involved. And we don't want our good streets to require exceptions. So in 2016, our council adopted our Complete Streets Manual, and throughout 2018 and 19, we've been working on our new street process manual and our street design manual, which replaces our paving design manual, and we've been working on the updated drainage design manual. So our street process manual, this is one of our biggest changes. We have a completely new manual for this. It's basically a roadmap to the application of some of our other manuals, like the street design manual, the drainage design manual, and other documents that are listed here, like the thoroughfare plan, our bike plan, and those type of things. A lot of our projects, most of our projects actually, have involvement with numerous city departments through the planning, design, and construction phases. And the street process manual provides a summary of the various departments and what they do. It's a guide for the planning design process. It defines the goals. It talks about what to consider in your project, which departments are involved. And basically, this very busy diagram talks about the areas outside the right-of-way are really typically the realm for our private development projects, and the area inside the right-of-way is really the public realm where our typical roadway projects take place. Also, as part of the street process manual, we have a development form, and this captures project information. It documents the key decisions that are made throughout the projects, and it's updated with each submittal. So that's part of this street process manual, and it's one of the things that we hope is really going to help with projects and making our projects a little bit easier. The second manual is our new street design manual, and it replaces the paving design manual. We've updated the name, and because calling it really a paving design manual, it implies that the manual is really only talking about pavement, and it's really not. It's incorporating our entire process. So it includes complete streets guiding principles. It incorporates envision design principles, which it fosters economic, social, and environmental aspects of the projects. It has 5 major credit categories that are shown here. And it really just encourages looking at the project as a whole and how the proposed project will truly contribute to conditions of sustainability. So sustainability is a big thing that we're really looking at in all of our projects. Another thing that is a big thing with the manual is looking at contextual street types. It's as defined in the Complete Streets Manual, and it's really based on land use and the surrounding context. And it's used in addition to functional types. There are 6 types as are listed here. And you can also see how those actually work in conjunction with the functional classification. I don't really want to get into a lot of detail here, but I just kind of want to show you some of the main things that are in the manual and some of those new things you're going to be seeing. And the street design manual also looks at the roadway in 3 zones. The first one is the pedestrian zone. And that's that area that's between the street and the building face. And it's really that essential path that gets that pedestrians from one place to another. But it's also where people exit from their parked cars, where people park their bikes, and where people wait for buses. So it's where we have to look at where do we put street furniture? Where do we look at putting bollards? How do people take care of their recycling and their garbage and those type of things? So it's really looking at those areas in much more detail. The second zone is the street zone, and it's between the curbs. And traditionally, this at first glance, it has one function, which has always been to move the cars. But we need to start looking at that. How do we incorporate our transit riders? How do we incorporate our bicyclists? Looking at this in a much more comprehensive manner. Looking at our street lighting, our paving treatments, and those type of things. Loading zones. How do we incorporate all that into this street zone? And the third and final zone is the intersection zone. And this really is where all modes of transportation and movement in multiple directions have to share that space. So again, we have to adopt a multimodal approach, not just look at that vehicular zone. We also are looking at design and control vehicles as part of the manual. The design vehicle is that which is accommodated within the traffic lanes, and the control vehicle may intrude into other lanes. So it shows an example here of passenger cars, which is design vehicle. And some of those control vehicles are those larger trucks, which actually go out into the other lanes. So usual design vehicles for most streets are going to be passenger cars, single unit trucks, and kind of those intermediate semi-trailers. And for arterial and collectors, those are usually going to need to accommodate interstate semi-trailers. One of the big differences is target speed. That replaces design speed as the primary control for determining geometrics of streets. And it is based on the street functional classification, the street type and context, and the ground floor land use characteristics along the right-of-way. And using the target speed approach, the desired traffic speed is determined before the design of project starts, and the roadway is designed to encourage drivers to move at that speed. So this is one of the big differences in how we're actually approaching the design of the roadway. And then bicycle facilities, there's information in the manual on bicycle facilities. It gives standards for our on-street and off-street bike lanes, for our shared and protected bike lanes, and our shared pedestrian and bike paths, and how we're going to handle intersection treatments. And a lot of that is carrying those bike lanes through the intersections and making sure that we take care of our bike riders. Everything, again, is focusing very much on the multimodal and making sure that we're taking care of everybody on our roadways. And looking at dimensions, we're also providing minimum, preferred, and maximum values for our street zones and our elements. It's based on the contextual street type and also the street classification. And it's hopefully going to make it much easier to work within the limited right-of-way. The example table here is actually given for pedestrian zones. And you can see it also talks about the frontage zone, and it gives sidewalk clear zone. And then it talks about that buffer and furnishing curb zone in there. So again, give some of those minimum and preferred widths on those zones. And then for landscape standards, it does give standard requirements for trees and planting areas in the streets. And there are different requirements for different stature trees, whether they be large, medium, or short ornamental. And you can also see an example over here about the tree root zone, and it gives different dimensions for that tree root. So there's a lot of details in these manuals that you may not have seen in the previous manuals. For street furniture standards, we have standard requirements for the siting of benches, bike racks, bus stops, trash cans, etc. You can see some examples here. Most of the above ground elements in the pedestrian zones should be placed in the buffer furnishing, and curb zone. And we have to make sure that we allow for ADA and the Texas Accessibility Standards compliance in those. The pavement design standards account for the site-specific soils, and the design is based on traffic volumes and character. Some of these factors can be predetermined based on the thoroughfare classification and location in relation to industrial, heavy commercial, and bus routes to a degree, which can simplify those design parameters. So that's discussed in the manual. And there are also requirements provided for unusual soil types and the design and use of pavers as discussed and where that's appropriate. The lighting standards have been adapted for LED lighting, which is the new city requirement. And the required illumination levels are provided for streets, sidewalks, and intersections. And this is an example of a figure which gives typical locations for street lighting at intersections. Okay, technical difficulty there. Evidently, we don't want to talk about the drainage design manual. There we go. Thank you. There we go. So moving on to our drainage design manual, it's been updated to reflect a lot of our current engineering practices. As I had mentioned, many of our models, applications, and even the basic guiding regulatory criteria governing drainage design have been updated since 1993, which was when our last manual was published. And our design criteria have been updated to reflect these changes. The EPA delegated the Clean Water Act responsibility to the state of Texas through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and so the criteria related to permitting has been updated to reflect that change through the use of the Texas Pollutant Discharge Elimination System construction permit requirements instead of the NIPD's requirements. There are also requirements to address stream buffers and state and federal endangered and listed species. And we've reorganized the manual into 11 different sections, and we provided guidance on sustainable drainage measure design. When I'm advancing, this thing's turning off on me. There we go. Thanks. Our updated methodologies are incorporating standardized, regionally implemented integrated stormwater management program measures that were previously adopted as voluntary with minimum project size limitations and lengthy checklists to complete to certify that the project was using ISWIM. The assessment of development impacts on the existing drainage system was previously required but not routinely performed. Because redevelopment is occurring in Dallas, this step in the normal design process becomes more critical, and it's also included in the new drainage design manual. The overall thought process is to incorporate more sustainable design measures as additional tools in the design toolbox on all sites and projects as part of the standard process where practicable, rather than as a separate process. I'm going to hit this one more time and hope this thing doesn't turn off on us. Here we go. For design storms and criteria, all systems must be designed to accommodate the 1% annual exceedance probability storm. And I'm going to say AEP from now on because that is a tongue twister. Detention must regulate the 1%, 2%, 10%, and 50% storms. So these are some of the tables that you will see in the manual relating to that. And some more design criteria. The discharge is going to be limited to existing conditions rather than capacity of downstream systems. And infill and redevelopment projects are exempt from detention if they are less than 1 acre, or if less than 5,000 square feet of added impervious area, or less than 10,000 square feet for roadway projects are being added. And roadway drainage design has been split into improved and unimproved roadways. And all streets must convey the 1% AEP storm event without exceeding the top of curb. And it's shown in this figure for improved roadways. For unimproved roadways, bar ditches, bioswales, bioretention swales, and culvert crossings may be necessary to convey that storm. And guidance is also given for acceptable locations for sustainable paving practices. There are many types of sustainable drainage measures that are discussed depending on site conditions. We have examples of rain gardens, bioretention, stormwater ponds, and permeable paving. And alternative C values and curve numbers are available in the manual. And again, some additional sustainable drainage measures are listed here as well. Again, a lot of different examples are given in the manual. And all projects should be designed so that erosion is minimized. Creek bank erosion and sedimentation are natural processes that can be aggravated by human causes. So natural channel setbacks prevent damage from large flood events and preserves natural riparian habitats and should be included in the drainage easement for channels. So there are graphics and things in the manual to talk about that. And in addition, bioengineering methods can be used instead of rock armoring structural methods in appropriate scenarios for permanent erosion control. Some examples include live staking, wattles, brush layering, brush mattressing, live crib walls, and geogrids. However, they should only be used in channels where the methods can withstand high flow velocities. And additional guidance is also provided for our culvert and bridge design, outfalls and energy dissipators, open channel design, stormwater lift station design, floodplain, and sump design requirements. As you're all aware, the projects must meet requirements of other regulatory agencies to receive city approval. So this is just a list of various agencies that must be coordinated with depending on the scope of the project. From a schedule standpoint, where we're at with this project, we are looking to finalize all the manuals this month and next. We're doing outreach to professional and technical community at meetings such as this, January and February. We're looking for council adoption this spring, and then also staff training in the spring. So we are looking to implement these manuals and move forward with the 2017 bond program using the new manuals. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick to talk about the 2017 bond program.
Again, Rick Galceran, so happy to be here and address you all. When I first came here, I thought nobody would know what the bond program was really about, so I can kind of fake news my way through this. Unfortunately, my two previous bosses are here, so I'm going to have to kind of keep things more truthful. For the sake of those that may not understand what a capital improvement bond program is, in particular for a city, let me just give a little 101. Cities generate their revenues by taxes, and on an everyday basis, they may pay electrical bills and fix windows and clean floors and so on, and that is generated through the what we call the revenue bond, or rather the general fund. Those are everyday taxes. But once in a while, about every 4, 5, 6 years, the cities have to generate money to do your big things. Replace a whole new street, a bridge, erect a new library, redo something of one another. And those are the capital bond programs, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Generally, they take about a year to prepare and to actually pass. This last 2017 bond program took a little bit longer because we had new city management, and it was decided by the mayor and council that we should allow that new city manager to put their hands, their prints on it. But it consists of public input, a technical criteria. In other words, we're gathering new projects. How do we make them rise? We usually do about 10% of the projects that we have in need of. So how do we prioritize those? We get public input. There's a couple of rounds for that. In this case, we had a citizens bond task force. Council approves finally what projects are going to be done, and they approve a budget. For the last two bond programs, that budget has been consistent with what you could, the revenues that you could generate without raising taxes. Voters approved back in November, and then we're into the implementation phase. This is a synopsis of what this 17 bond program is consisting of. There's 10 propositions. For those of you that are, like myself, old school, we used to have propositions based on 1, 2, 3, and so on, but the state decided that they were going to use that numbering system and allow the cities to use the A, B, and C. So a little bit about Proposition A, which is streets and transportation. A little bit over $500 million just for that. Over 1,000 projects. Anything from traffic signals, sidewalk replacements, fixing critical streets, major thoroughfares, and so on. Proposition B, which is Parks and Recreation. Went too far. 260 million, 163 projects, 5 aquatics parks, zoo renovations, 38 miles of trail improvements, multiple recreation centers. And this is a unique one, Proposition C, that's dedicated just to Fair Park. 12 historic buildings. You know, when just a little bit of information, when we think about Fair Park, we're always thinking, well, why doesn't the city just upkeep it like they're supposed to, right? Well, keep in mind how long Fair Park or the State Fair came to Texas, and a lot of those facilities were facilities that were constructed then in support of that, the State Fair. And more importantly, they weren't really, some of them may have not been constructed in a way that they were going to last very long. They were thinking one state fair. Proposition D, flood control, about $50 million for 85 projects, from bag stabilization to drainage flow improvements. Then we put in approximately $15.5 million for libraries. Really, there's 2 new libraries. We call one of them a replacement because we're actually changing the whole location, putting in a whole new library. And that it's at Forest Green, and then we have Vickery Meadow. We're also doing some improvements to the main library down in the Eric Johnson Central Library downtown. Any of you have not been to that library, it is really awesome. I encourage you to do so. There's a lot of historical facts, also one of the original copies of the Constitution you can find there. Proposition F, we have many cultural facilities throughout the city, and these are some of the work that we have to do on roofs and HVAC systems and security upgrades. Too many of those. Proposition G, public safety. We are also adding some security upgrades to, and most of this work is actually already done, but to a lot of the substations and the Jack Evans Police Headquarters. But there's also a new fire station, the replacement of 36 and 46, interior renovations, and so on. City Hall and administrative facilities. The hardest thing to do is to convince, our council, to the citizens that the city employees should have facilities that are adequate for a work environment. And this was addressed. This is a great win for that, for the workers, for people that make their living there at the city's facilities. 37 facilities in all, and again, a lot of it, either if not expansion, upgrades. Economic development and housing. The money is there, but we don't actually list projects because a lot of those projects are projects that come up that we anticipate in a 5-year period. So the money is there to be able to supplement those and implement those projects as they come up. Something a little bit different was Proposition J, and that's homeless assistance, and that's $20 million. Barely a drop in the bucket for permanent supportive housing. So now the nitty-gritty. So what's so different? I addressed this same group 1 year ago. I'm sure you remember all the details of which I spoke on. But there are some differences. So the objective of this bond program, or rather the mandate, is that we get everything implemented in 5 years. We've got projects that are still from the 2003, 6, and then 12 bond program. And so in this case, the directive was to try to get this all done. Keeping that in mind, there was a creation of a bond office. My boss came up to me and said, "Rick, you got 2 choices. You could stay in Public Works and run that, or you can be the director for the bond office. Oh, and by the way, I want you to be the director of the bond office." and so here I am doing that. Again, primary responsibilities: implement 5 years, and also get all those previous bond programs completed. We've been another unique area is the use of a program manager to help us implement those projects as well. So why was it necessary? Track and account for the funding. Where is the money going? Keep in mind, in the past, the citizens would vote, and so each of the departments, delivery departments, whether it be parks, public works, in this case transportation, the drainage folks, the people that did the facilities, they knew that they had this funding. We would work with each other to make sure that there was going to be funding enough that year to implement. And then we were kind of just there was an oversight, but not a demand on, you've got 5 years to do this. And so this is different now. So we track that funding, we track the projects, every project. What we're trying to achieve is that timely delivery of the bond program. Its quality, its assurance, and then more importantly, a mechanism for tracking and display. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So how did we do this? Again, rather than going separately for each department, centralized that. An accounting system, what we're using today is called Tririga, that captures each project. It's I wouldn't say no different, similar to your e-builder or your others that you might be familiar with. Thank you. Oh. And then the other part is every department had to work with their support departments of the city. You might be thinking, what do you mean by that? Well, it's not only the delivery departments, but they have to work with that department that issues permits, that department that works with the environmental assessment, that department, the city attorney's office. And so every department was kind of doing this on their own. They all work through the bond office, and the bond office helps facilitate those things happening. At the end, it's about that credibility, and it's got to fall into one department as a responsible one. And again, that's the bond office. That last bullet there talks about maintaining a website that allows transparency and public scrutiny. And that's that transparency that I was mentioning. That slide is just more of what I've just talked about. And then this slide kind of tells you, so Rick, how have you and your staff done? I think we've done pretty well. Not as much as I wanted to do, but for the first year, the ambition was to award and to start implementing 161 million. We are at 135. We would have reached that in January this month. So we're running a little bit behind. How about the previous bond programs? Well, we've awarded 2003. There's like 2% left, but we awarded 233,000 last year for 18 of the 06 bond program, 16 almost 17 million. And then 12, that's kind of misleading a little bit. It says 221, but 204 of that was for the Mills Creek Peaks Branch drainage system. So that's a huge one, but nonetheless, there's many others there as well. If you want more information on this, don't bother me. Look at the website. I'm just kidding. I'm here to answer any of your questions, but you can also look up all this information by both naming the projects or through a map, a GIS map, and you can click and you get all the information, including when it's scheduled and when we're scheduled to be constructed and worked on. And then that also helps the public as well as know how are we doing? Did we meet those schedules as well? So with that, I think we open it up to questions.
Sure, we got time for some questions.
Regarding the complete streets, you guys have done several now, including Matilda in my neighborhood, which I thank you for. It's beautiful. what lessons learned have you come across with the complete streets that we have so far?
I think one of the main lessons learned is basically to account for maintenance, first of all. And also as we're designing the street, to make sure that we are looking at the functionality of the street, to make sure that as we are looking at the adjacent land uses, if the adjacent land use happens to be heavily bar use or restaurant use, to make sure that we're looking at the plants that we're putting adjacent, make sure we're not putting a lot of low ground cover and things that can easily be walked on by folks. You kind of chuckle, but those are things that you learn through experience, that they're not going to look very good in a year or so after people have trampled all over them at 2 o'clock in the morning when they've come out of the bar. So, looking at making sure that we're putting appropriate plant material and appropriate things adjacent to those land uses, and then making sure that we've worked with those property owners adjacent to make sure we have landscape maintenance in place before we actually move forward with those projects.
I got a question for you, Chris. I asked you earlier, and you kind of told me, but I think it'd be nice for everyone to know. When will this manual be done? Will it be available online? And also, at what point do we need to start abiding by that manual?
Basically, we are looking at trying to have the manuals completed. As I said, this month and next, we're finalizing them. City staff is still doing their final review on the manuals, and until we're completely comfortable with what's in the manuals, we don't want to release them. They will be available online when that occurs. And as far as when they will actually be abided by, once City Council approves them, that will be when they are officially utilized. So by spring of this year is when we are looking at having that accomplished. So when they are available online, we will post that. They'll be available on the website. Which website I can't tell you right now, but on a website.
I think it's important that when that does come out, if we find out about it, we'll probably send that out to our members as well.
That would be great. We'd love for you to do that for us.
The fiasco of the acquisition, promise of the library on Forest Lane, and now the auction of the property at a huge loss to the city, doesn't exactly encourage citizens to believe in your book. Can you address that, Andy?
I'd rather you take it. Actually, there's no great loss. We did become ambitious, 2006 bond program. We were following a master plan, and we bought many of the areas properties that we wanted to use. So the good thing about it is that when we bought those properties, we bought them at a low. At the time that those properties weren't as expensive as they are now. But as we went into the next bond program, 12, there was no money set aside for libraries. In now 17, there was only 15 million set aside. And so the question is, should we keep those properties in anticipation? We still have to maintain them. Or could we sell that property, of which that bond money or money's funds has to be appropriated to libraries itself? So I would tell you that we weren't trying to be investment bankers, but in this case, it kind of turned out to our favor. With that said, no loss. We want to be good stewards of that money. And so we'll have either the option of keeping with them, selling them, and using those revenues for other library, or at the end, I think I said the first one, actually hold on to them for future.
We have time for one more quick question. Do you have?
Sure. Bouncing off what he asked you, just to confirm, there will not be an opportunity for community comment on the new drainage and paving plans?
Basically, we made a decision that, given the schedule that we're on, that really we just want to do community outreach So the answer to your question is no.
All right, we had two great speakers today. Let's give them all applause, please.